pick and prevail in your fantasy football league with the help of our starting lineup. At host to quarterback the show, we have Nick Giacobbe. Up next, a dual threat in Dynasty and Daily Fantasy, we have Cody Repass. And finally, working the waiver wire, we have Nick Cap. These are your playmakers that will provide you with sleepers, breakouts, and busts to help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 25 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, in the hopes that we help you prevail in Week 12 and the rest of the 2021 fantasy football season. I am your host, Nick Giacobbe, and joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, Thanksgiving was yesterday. For the listeners out there, Thanksgiving is actually 2 days, so we're traveling into the future for us, but Thanksgiving was yesterday. 3 games the Lions and Bears played. I'm sure it was a high-scoring offensive shootout. The Bills faced the Saints. The Raiders faced the Cowboys. I'm sure it was a phenomenal fantasy day for everybody. I'm sure we had a great Thanksgiving meal, but it's Black Friday, one of my favorite holidays of the year. So, Nick, how are we feeling going into Week 12?
Dude, I know we say it for like the past 3 weeks, but how is it Week 12 already? I feel like this whole season's flown by. It's crazy. It's crazy.
You know, so we are recording on Tuesday, November 23rd at the moment. We had a little bit of scheduling conflicts with Thanksgiving, et cetera, but that's okay. It's Thanksgiving week. That's kind of how it goes. We're still going to give you all the information that we can on a Tuesday show and to prepare you for Week 12. I checked my leagues this morning. It's a Tuesday. The records are updated. The points are updated. So I checked all of my records, and I've been middle of the pack in most of my leagues. I didn't really start off too hot in most of my leagues. So I guess I don't want to say I've been down. I haven't really been checked out per se, but I've just known that, like, well, I'm not winning the points. My team isn't the best in any of these leagues. So it's just I win or I don't, kind of. It's kind of that situation. I checked my leagues, and I think I've kind of undersold myself a little bit. In my 12-man league, I'm second in points, only down 3 points to the number one team. And I have the best record in the league at 8-3. In my other 12-man league, I was 12th or 11th in points for a while. That team was no bueno. It was no good, but I've jumped up to 6th in points, and I think I'm tied for the 3rd or 4th best record at 7-4. Then in my Dynasty League, which is definitely my worst team, I lost J.K. Dobbins to start the season. Amari Cooper's missed 3 or 4 games. Russell Wilson missed like 4 games. Tyreek Hill has been a little bit inconsistent. So that team has just not been great. But I'm still 6-5 in that league, and I think I'm 6th in points out of 10. So roughly middle of the pack. Then in our league, I didn't even know this till I checked it this morning. Currently I'm 6th. Record-wise, I'm 6th. I'm 5-6. I am 2nd in points. I had to double check this. I have the 2nd most points in the league. The reason why I probably undersold that team a bit is because my points against are horrific. I have 100 more points than just about everybody in the league scored against me. And that is why my team is so low. But I didn't even know how good my team was at that point, which is crazy to me. That's a state of the union on my fantasy teams. But I'm in the hunt for all my playoffs, which is good. I know you're in the hunt for at least, 5 out of 6, 4 out of 6?
Yeah, our league's the only one I struggled in where I tried to tank, and then it bit me, and I won my matchup by 25, 30 points with a bunch of waiver guys. Not terrible players. It's your plug and play flex.
Well, you benched Tyreek Hill.
I benched Tyreek Hill. I benched Tyler Lockett, and my team, still, it's all the guys you probably plug in at your flex spot. It pretty much got played, and they managed to clips a win for some reason. Nick said he's first in points against. I'm number 2. I'm a little distant behind him after this past week where someone dropped an
Nick was number 1 for a while, and my team has just lapped him. I have 1,700 something points against after 11 weeks. So what are we averaging right here? We're averaging like 154 scored against me, roughly. It's probably a little bit more than that. Anyway, but yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about that tanking at the end of the show. We have a fun conversation coming up, and we have a fun show coming up because, again, we're recording on Tuesday. We don't have a lot of news updates. No practices have happened yet, but we're going to give you some news. We'll give you lock flop with every position that we always do. We'll do our rapid fire start sit, and then we have a couple other fun segments planned for later in the show. So If this is your first time listening, thank you so much and welcome. We do the show on Tuesdays, on Fridays, and on Sundays for Tuesdays and Friday shows. The audio version can be found on iTunes, on Spotify, Anchor, basically anywhere where you can find a podcast, you can find the Primetime Fantasy Podcast. If you are on iTunes, a 5-star rating and a review is greatly appreciated. If you want to watch the audio and video version of the show, and please do, because Nick does a great job with his fancy graphics, YouTube Primetime Fantasy Podcast, where you will find that. For the live show on Sundays, the time does fluctuate. Some people took off Thanksgiving weekend, so guess who has to work on Sunday? That's me. So Sunday show, Nick, I think we're doing 12:15, I believe, right when I get back from work. I think that's the plan. So 12:15 for the live show on Sunday. We're going to go just right up until kickoff at that point. But we do let you know every week when the live show is. Live show can be found on our Twitter, our Facebook, and our YouTube. Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok is PrimeTimeFFPod. Facebook, YouTube, Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Please support us on all forms of social media. All right, let's start off with the news and the injury updates. Eric Ebron will miss time due to knee surgery. Eric Ebron's not the fantasy player that's being affected here. It's actually Pat Freiermuth. And he's been a hot waiver wire pickup, and I think he's actually a really great dynasty pickup. So, Nick, how do you think this really affects Freiermuth from a fantasy perspective that Ebron will not be competing for any targets with him?
I think a lot of people are going to overhype this a little bit. Pittsburgh ran a lot of 2 tight end sets. So Ebron and Freiermuth were on the field at the same time a lot. Freiermuth's still going to see just about his same production. Maybe it takes an uptick because it's a rookie and they're starting to click better in the second half of the year. But I mean, I don't see too much, changing just from Ebron being out so much as just developing your relationship with your quarterback. So if you believed in Freiermuth with Ebron there, Ebron not being there is not going to take away workload from Freiermuth. I'm not saying that. I just don't think he'll have too much of an increase. I think it's going to go more towards the wide receivers. I think they'll run a lot more 3 wide receiver sets, get James Washington some more snaps.
I disagree a little bit because throughout the season, Pat Freiermuth his targets have gone up exponentially. He started off 1, 4, 5, 1, 2. Then the last 5 weeks, we have 7, 7, 6, 9, 7. In those 5 game span, he also has 4 touchdowns. Also in that 5 game span, he's only had under 12 fantasy points once at 6.1. So now I think it's going to be an uptick. Freiermuth, I believe, should be owned in all fantasy leagues, in 10-man leagues, 12-man leagues. He should be owned as a backup tight end. Definitely should be owned in all dynasty leagues. I think he's a great dynasty tight end as a rookie, and he's going to be a good tight end in this league for years to come. So I think this is a big uptick for Pat Freiermuth. Adrian Peterson was cut. Golden Tate was added to the Tennessee Titans. Honestly, I don't think either are fantasy relevant. I don't think any Titans running back should be started in any fantasy format. I don't know if you have anything to say on that, but
I think if Jeremy McNichols is still out, Devontae, it's Foreman's backfield, and it's not much competition. I think Tennessee plays New England this week. I don't think they have a shot in competing. I think New England's the better football team.
Yeah.
Even if you had Henry and Julio Jones, I think New England's stellar. I think Tennessee's a little overhyped.
New England's playing very, very well right now. Zach Wilson is going to be starting for your New York Jets. Superstar, elite quarterback, future Hall of Famer Mike White is currently in COVID protocol. I think he's a close contact.
So is Flacco.
So is Flacco. Yeah. So Cool Joe and superstar Mike White are both in COVID close contact protocols. So Zach Wilson is starting. Nick, how do you think this affects your Jets offense of Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, Jameson Crowder?
I like Corey Davis. I think, they're going up against Houston this week. It's a winnable game, but not only is it a winnable game, Houston puts no pass rush on your quarterback. The Jets' weakness is their offensive line. That's the biggest weakness on their team, that and the secondary. With the offensive line being able to hold up and give Wilson time, he's going to take his shot deep. I think Elijah Moore has a huge game. I think Corey Davis gets a couple touchdowns. I think Michael Carter would have had a day against this team. I think this is going to be a good week for Zach Wilson to really break out as a quarterback coming off the injury. There's not really going to be a debate if Mike White's, on the bench and Zach Wilson throws a pick. It's not going to be, start Mike White. Like, that's not going to be the situation. I think this is a good situation. This is a great situation for Wilson. Good game to come back from the injury from. Good opportunity for all these guys fantasy-wise.
I think it's a big opportunity for Wilson to kind of sink or swim. The Texans are arguably the worst team in the league. The Lions are up there, the Jags are up there, but the Texans are not a great football team. This is an opportunity for Zach Wilson to go out there and show if he truly is special and if he is going to be the Jets franchise quarterback for the next 3-4 years. If he goes out there and has a bad game, it's not the end of him or anything like that, but you're facing a bad team. Your offense is starting to roll a little bit. Elijah Moore, I'm going to talk about him later on in the show, but he's been very productive. So it's time to get on the saddle and to see exactly what he's going to do. Last bit of news, Logan Thomas was designated to return from the IR. Not sure if he's playing this week. Monday Night Football against the absolutely horrifically bad Seattle Seahawks. We'll see what happens next week. Very short news segment. Again, we're recording on Tuesday, so not much to talk about, but there's not many notable injuries that we can even talk about going into the weekend. So I don't think, unless somebody gets injured in practice, there's really not much that could be covered in the next few days. Anyway, so we're going to go right into lock flop. One player from each position that me and Nick think is a lock, and one person that we think is a flop. So, Nick, who is your lock at quarterback for this week?
Mine's Tyrod Taylor. I called it early in the year. When it's a mobile quarterback, and mobile quarterbacks, with bad game script always deliver fantasy-wise. Jalen Hurts has been winning games, but let's not forget the first half of the first quarter of the year, where they were not putting up wins, and he was getting numbers in a top 5 fantasy quarterback because he could run. He was always passing because he had to catch up in games. Like, the game script was perfect, and it's the same exact situation right here. Tyrod Taylor, he came off a pretty good week last week. Fantasy-wise, finished with 19, only needed 100 passing yards, but it was 2 rushing touchdowns that gave him the week. He has the same upside against the Jets, who do not have a very talented defense at all.
For me, it's a little bit of a tricky one because I wouldn't say this guy's an absolute lock. However, if you need to stream a quarterback, if you have somebody on bye, Kyler's on bye, obviously. Mahomes is on bye. Russell Wilson isn't really trustable at the moment. If you need a sneaky guy to play, I'm going to say Mac Jones will finish as a top 15 quarterback this week. The Tennessee Titans have given up the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. The Titans, they played Tyrod Taylor last week. And last week, Tyrod Taylor, he did have 19 points against Tennessee. So I think Mac Jones could post similar numbers. The Patriots, as Nick just said, they're rolling right now. They're the number 1 They're leading the division without Tom Brady. Mac Jones has looked pretty good as not a fantasy quarterback per se, but as a quarterback, he's not making bad decisions. He's keeping his team in games and he's winning his team games. He almost beat the Bucs like week 4. I know it's a Belichick thing too. It's not just Mac Jones going up there and being a superstar, but he's not making bad decisions. And I think Mac Jones could be a top 15 fantasy quarterback this week. I think over the offseason or the next 2 off seasons, they could get him some weapons and he could really be a pretty solid quarterback in this league. And I know it's not going to make Nick or any Jet fans happy, but that's the reality of the situation. So I say if you really need to start a quarterback this week, start Mac Jones. I think he's worth taking a flyer on. I don't know what his daily fantasy number is, but it's probably not too high. Probably wouldn't be a bad start for daily fantasy lineups. But Nick, who would be a bad start in daily or regular fantasy? Who's a guy that you are saying is a flop for this week? Quarterback.
I'm not saying he's a flop, but I'm saying temper your expectations. I don't think he could. I think he can, but I don't think he will finish inside the top 10. It's the QB9 on the year, Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers has been pretty consistent for the year. He's only cracked 25 twice this season. Once against Detroit and Minnesota this last week. But those 2 defenses, those 2 secondaries, that's not Jalen Ramsey. That's not Von Miller coming off the edge now that they're dealing with a tackle injury. That's not Aaron Donald coming through the middle. I think it's a tough matchup for him. I think it's a tough situation. I think they're going to wind up cashing it in before the bye week. I think the Rams wipe the floor with them. I think Rams are coming off the bye this week, I think. So
they are, yeah. This has to be an Odell game, right? Like, it has to be. It has to be the Odell game.
It should be.
The Packers defense isn't great. Like, Adam Thielen just had 25 and Jefferson just had 40.
Yeah, I agree.
The OBJ game.
In terms of Rodgers, he's been consistent enough where you can't bench him because he's consistently getting 15 points, only 2 weeks where he hasn't done it. But I just don't think you're going to have that big of a ceiling with him this week. Only 300 passing yards in 2 games. I don't think he's going to be able to do that against this team.
For me, I didn't even realize that I did this. I took the quarterback against Mac Jones. That's Ryan Tannehill. The New England Patriots defense has been spectacular this year without Stephon Gilmore. They're second against fantasy quarterbacks, only averaging 13.5 points. The Bills are the only team ahead of them. Tannehill might be without A.J. Brown. That's the major injury that I'd love to give an update on if we were recording later on in the week. We don't have an update on A.J. Brown at the moment, just that he had chest x-rays. But even if he does have A.J. Brown, Bill Belichick's going to take him away. He's going to let Nikhil Westbrook-Hines, I think his name is, there's no Derrick Henry. There's no other wide receiver out there besides A.J. Brown. Belichick's just going to double A.J. Brown. It's like what he did against Calvin Johnson a couple of years ago. So, yeah, I don't really see Tannehill doing much against the Patriots. And I can see the Patriots, like Nick said, really kind of wiping the floor. So, there you go. For me, wide receivers. Let's go to wide receivers. Who's your absolute lock for wide receivers this week?
Mine's Marvin Jones Jr. He hasn't had too great of a season. He started off hot, kind of cooled down. But I think this is a good week where he could bounce back. Over the last 4 weeks, 8 targets, 5 targets, 6 targets, 6 targets. And who are they going up against? We called Seattle the fantasy carnival at the beginning of the year with Dallas Cowboys. No, we all know who the real fantasy carnival is. It's the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons absolutely suck on the secondary. I think the Jaguars go walk in there, and I think they pull off an upset against this fringe playoff team. I think the Atlanta Falcons are imposters. I don't think they're that talented. I think no Calvin Ridley there. They're going to struggle, and I think Trevor Lawrence has a chance to be the breakout rookie, the number 1 overall pick that we thought he would be this week.
I hate the Falcons. That's all I'm going to say. For me, I'm on the train now. Nick has enlightened me. I am on the Elijah Moore train. I am picking Elijah Moore as my lock this week. His last 4 weeks, 13, 27, 13, 29. He's averaged on the season 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In 9 games, he's averaged 6 or more targets in those 9 games. 7 of them. That's really good. That's a lot of targets. That's what you want in a PPR league. His touchdown numbers aren't great, but he does have 4, and those 4 have came in the last 3 weeks. The last 3 weeks, 2, 1, 1. So the numbers are really good for Elijah Moore. And again, he's facing the Texans. The Texans are not a good football team in any way. They're definitely not a good team on defense, giving up the 6th most points to wide receivers. His rookie quarterback is coming back. I'm not exactly sure if that's going to help or hurt him. However, the volume should be there. I think it's a game that you play Elijah Moore. I think he's going to have a really nice day for you in your flex spot. I'm not saying play him as a wide receiver 1 or 2, but I'm saying he's going to have a good day in your flex spot. He has a favorable matchup. I would play him. And I think I'll play Corey Davis this week in our league. I think I'll flex him too because I think it's a favorable matchup for those 2 Jets wide receivers. I don't think I play Crowder though. I think Crowder's wide receiver 3. He's the 3rd option now. I wouldn't play Crowder, but those 2 I think are very playable.
I agree.
What about your flop, Nick? Who's your flop on the week for wide receivers?
Mine's Marquez Valdes-Scantling. A lot of people are going to go pick him up after this big week. He had 10 targets last week, 123 yards and a touchdown. Out of those 10 targets, he caught 4 balls. It's not a, MVS, he got the workload. No, he gets this workload, 2-3 times a year, and he never puts up the catches that go with it. I don't think he's had over 6 catches over the last 3 years that he's been with Green Bay. He really does not put up big numbers. He takes that deep bomb. And like I said before with Rodgers is not going to have time with that injured offensive line against that Rams pass rush coming off a bye week. MVS, people are going to pick him up. People are going to go play him. I'm telling you, I don't think he's going to be able to do what he did last week against that Rams secondary.
You know what the Packers are when it comes to their second wide receivers? They're like a child that plays with toys, like a 2-year-old. You pick up the nice shiny red ball and you say, that's cool. You might chew on it or whatever, and you toss it. And then you go over to your toy bear and you pick it up. And you go over to a book and start to read it. The attention span isn't there because the second wide receiver for the Packers hasn't been there for like 8 years when Randall Cobb and Jordy Nelson were the 1 and 2. Rodgers hasn't had a 1 or 2 since then. I know Randall Cobb's back now, and I was high on Randall Cobb earlier in the season. I thought he could be a number 2 again. No. MVS, nope. Alan Lazard, nope. Tunyon last year scored touchdowns. That was it. The Packers just don't find number 2 options. They just don't. So I agree with you on that. Mine's going to be Jalen Waddle. I've been very, very high on Jalen Waddle this year. I think Nick can attest to that. I think I've been one of the higher guys when it comes to being a Jalen Waddle guy. I like the volume that he gets with Tua, and even with Jacoby Brissett, he got the volume, and I He's been on my lock segment a couple times. But with that said, this week they're facing the Panthers then, and the Panthers have given up the second least amount of points to wide receivers. They've also been very tough on quarterbacks. So I think the Panthers are due for a win, and then Cam Newton's starting to get hot. So I think the Panthers will win this game. I took them in the spread pool, I think, plus 1.5 or something like that. So
That's the line for this game?
Let me look it up right now. It might be 1.5.
Oh my God.
Hold on.
Don't tell me Miami's the favorite.
I think I could be wrong. Let me look it up right now. I'm going on my spread pool. This is on the spread line. Miami's not the favorite. Miami's plus 1.5. So I'm taking Carolina minus 1.5.
Got it. Okay.
So anyway, I wouldn't play Waddle in your flex this week. I think you're going to have other options, especially with a deep wide receiver position. I wouldn't play him. So on to running backs. Nick, who's your lock for running backs this week?
My lock is David Johnson. I know people are going to be – look at Nick. If you're on the video, look at him slapping that head. David Johnson.
Nick loves David Johnson. Nick said a man crush on David Johnson for like 5 years now.
I've had a man crush on him. I took him with the 6th overall pick, and he went down for the year in week 1.
He's the high school sweetheart that he can't let go of.
David Johnson, 13 carries the first week after the bye. They're going up against the Jets, the worst team against the run in the NFL for fantasy purposes. And who else is in that backfield? It was Phillip Lindsay. Phillip Lindsay was cut. It was Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram was traded. It's back to David Johnson's backfield. I don't think he has a huge game, but I think he gets you in double digits. I think he puts up good enough of a week. I think he gets in the ground. I think he gets a touchdown on the ground. He's had, I think, 5 targets in the last 4 weeks, and with no one else in that backfield. I think it's David Johnson, Brandon Cooks, Tyrod Taylor. Those are the only 3 guys that this ball has a chance at moving down the field with.
For me, my lock is Antonio Gibson because he is going up against the Seahawks on Monday Night Football. They've given up the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs. And Pete Carroll says, we want to run more. We want to run more. Well, guess what? A football team is going to give you a dose of their own medicine because they are going to run more. Antonio Gibson, he hasn't cracked 100 yards yet this season, but you know what? I'm calling it. He's going to crack that 100 because the Seahawks defense is atrocious. They are no good. They do not like to tackle. They do not like to stop the run. I think James Conner had a 20-point game last week with 2 touchdowns. I don't know his yardage, but I think he had 2 touchdowns. So I think Gibson's going to get in the end zone at least once. I think he's going to get 100 yards. He won't get the receptions. But if you're a person who has Antonio Gibson, you've been waiting for another one of those good weeks. He only had a handful of them. This is going to be a good Antonio Gibson week. Play him against the Seahawks confidently because the Seahawks, they're not good. I'm going to be miserable on Monday Night Football. Absolutely miserable.
Just real quick before you move on from Gibson, I agree with you. I'd start Gibson this week. But if I showed you Gibson's stats and I showed you Josh Jacobs' stats, I think you'd look at them as mirror images. Like, I feel like Gibson's stats have been identical to the reasons you don't take Josh Jacobs in fantasy.
Yeah, you're not wrong on that. I am an anti-Jacobs guy because of injuries. Yeah, yep. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I'm giving him too much credit for his ADP. You're not wrong on that. That's a fault.
I agree, though. I would start Gibson this week. I was going to type him down, but I saw you have him first, so I went the David Johnson route.
Yeah, I jumped on that at like 8 in the morning during my lunch break, or 10 in the morning. I don't know, whatever. Who's your flop of the week, Nick?
You talked about Miami, Jalen Waddle going up against the number 2 pass defense. I'm going with the number 1 run defense. It's Myles Gaskin up against that Panthers front 7. The Panthers have been the number 1 team against the run all year. And you want to talk about a model for inconsistency? It is this man, Myles Gaskin.
Have you seen, I don't want to cut you off, I'm sorry. Have you seen the joke going around the fantasy community about Myles Gaskin?
No.
Do you have his stats pulled up right now?
I have his stats pulled up.
Can you read off the week number that he's had over 10 or more fantasy points? The number.
Oh, yeah. So that's exactly what I was
read them off. I want you to read them off.
Start from week 1. Don't worry. That's exactly what I was getting to. Week 1, 12 points. Week 2, 8 points. Week 3, 10. Week 4, 0.3. Week 5, 32. Week 6, 3.4. Just so I could clarify real quick, every odd week has been double digits. Every even week has been single digits. I didn't even know about this joke, but I think I called this in week 5 or 6.
Oh, it was a joke, all right. It is a joke. There. If you want
to talk about a model for inconsistency, it's Myles Gaskin in those even number weeks. And in this even week, he's going up against the number 1 defense against the run. Myles Gaskin, he could comfortably sit on your bench till week 13.
It's perfectly balanced as all things should be. That's really what Myles Gaskin is. He's going to end the season.
Thanos snapped away his even weeks.
Well, the good news is we have. Well, when's his bye? Hold on, I don't know if his bye.
His bye is week 14.
Okay.
Oh, that's not good.
His bye is week 14, so that'd be a bad week. And we have 18 weeks. I was gonna say there's 17 games. We have 18 weeks. So, well, the championship week will be week 17. So maybe you can't trade anymore. Trade deadline is passed.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say on Myles Gaskin?
Nah, feel free to go. Move on.
Alrighty. My flop of the week is somebody that I've been pretty high on. Probably one of the steals of the draft. That's going to be playoff Lenny. That's going to be Leonard Fournette. And he's facing the Colts defense. The Colts defense held both of the Bills running backs last week to a combined 8 points. I think Zach Moss had 0.5 or something like that. In terms of the running back, the Colts defense has given up the least amount of points. They lapped the Saints, only allowing 14.1 points to running backs. So I think you got to temper your expectations when it comes to Leonard Fournette. He's been very consistent. He's only at under 13 fantasy points once since week 4. So he's been very consistent. But again, the Colts defense looked really, really good last week against the Bills, and they've looked pretty good the whole season. Look great against running backs. The front seven with guy from Oregon, DeForest Buckner, and the linebacker, what's his name? Leonard? It's slipping my mind. Linebacker for the Colts. Darius Leonard, yeah. They have a good front seven. So I'm not saying to bench him because, again, bye weeks. And the position is so thin. You probably have to play him, but I think he's going to be a flop. I don't think he's finishing as a top 10, top 15 running back this week. On to tight ends. Who is your tight end lock of the week?
I know he's coming off IR, and there might be concerns. He might not even come off IR, but if he is, it's Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas against that Seattle secondary. So Jamal Adams was absolutely horrendous against Zach Ertz last week. Well, I'm going to tell you a guy that's a lot more athletic than Zach Ertz, and that's Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas can go and have a day against that secondary. Zach Ertz just came off a 28-point game where Jamal Adams had to have a pass interference call on 3rd and goal to lose the game for the team. I think Logan Thomas is more athletic, can create more separation. I think Logan Thomas will bounce back. I think he has a good week, finishes within the top 10.
I'm gonna go with Noah Fant. And again, I like to play the matchups. If you haven't learned already, I do like playing the matchups. So Noah Fant's going up against the Chargers defense that's given up the 3rd most fantasy points to tight end. So I think Noah Fant's going to be a guy that Teddy Bridgewater is going to look onto. And he's been a bit inconsistent, but most tight ends are. He's had a couple stinkers here and there. But he's had a couple other good games, 16, 24, 10. So he hasn't played the Chargers yet, but I think he's going to get you a guy 10 plus fantasy points this week. I think he gets in the end zone. I think he gets 3 or 4 receptions. So I'm going to say that Noah Fant is a guy that you could lock into your lineup this week. So who is your flop of the week, Nick?
Mine is Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry had a very good stretch of 4 weeks where he looked really good. He finished with double-digit points. He's currently the tight end 7. Over the last weeks, he has eclipsed 4 targets 0 times. They're not needing to pass the ball as much. Teams flat out. New England looks good. I think he's still talented. They gave him more. So if you're playing one of the tight ends, they're setting it up for Henry. But I don't think he's good enough for a play. He's averaging a little under 4 targets a game on the entire season. And if I told you that from the tight end position, and he's a tight end 7 right now, if I told you that coming from the tight end position this year, you would say there's better options to play. I think Hunter Henry, you could let him sit on the bench till he sees more of that workload.
For me, I'm going to say it's Tyler Conklin. I know he's been a streamer over the last 8 weeks or so. Some weeks he's lived up to that 10, 16, some of them less than 5 points. This week, I'm going to say he's going to score less than 5 points because he's facing the San Francisco 49ers defense that has allowed the least amount of fantasy points to tight ends. Kirk Cousins has been a guy that I've spoken about on this show, and I didn't even mention this on Monday. Kirk Cousins right now, 21 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. If he gets to 28, he's going to break Tom Brady's record or tie it at least. I don't think he's going to get to 28 and 2, but still. Kirk's going to throw the ball to guys like Jefferson and Thielen. I don't think Conklin's involved in this offense as much as you'd hope he'd be, and I think that Fred Warner is going to have good coverage on him. So I would not play Conklin if you are looking to stream a tight end. So That's going to be our lock and flop for this week. And now we're going to go to rapid fire. We're going to tell you one player from each team for each game. We'll tell you which one we would rather start. So, first game, Steelers at the Bengals. Chase Claypool against T. Higgins.
I'm going to go. That's tough. Higgins has been really consistent, but I feel like Claypool offers a little more upside with being, only 3 real threats on that offense. I'll go with Higgins for the consistency.
I don't know. Again, the Bengals offense kind of rotates who gets the most targets besides Jamar Chase being the alpha dog over there. So I'm going to take Claypool just because I know he's going to be the number 2 option for sure. And I also think the game script will be better for the Steelers in this one. So I'm going to go with Claypool. Chris Godwin or Michael Pittman, the Bucs at the Colts.
I'm going to go with Godwin. Godwin's been really good without Antonio Brown there. Since AB's injury, he's been really consistent. He's been a good wide receiver. I've been down on Godwin even since the year he boomed and finished top 10. But he's been too consistent without Antonio Brown there for me to rule him out. I think while AB's out, I think he actually has more points per game than Pittman as well. So
I'm with you on Godwin because Pittman's going up against the 3rd-ranked defense when it comes to fantasy wide receivers against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So as much as we both love Pittman on the season, I think it's going to be tougher for him to have a great week this week. So I'm going to go with Godwin. Panthers at the Dolphins. Cam Newton or Tua Tagovailoa.
We gave you the stats about the Panthers defense. Give me Cam Newton. Cam Newton's going to go light up the Dolphins, put them back in their place.
And the stat about the Dolphins defense, they've given up the 3rd most points to quarterbacks. Is Cam Newton available in our league right now? Is he? Hold on one second.
You'll have to pick him up off waivers.
Hold on. Let's
don't pick him up. Every quarterback you've picked up has stunk that week. And I'm rocking Cam in 2 leagues.
Yeah, but I'm not rocking Russell Wilson this week, so I'm done rocking Russell Wilson. He's going into timeout.
I don't know. Cam just lit up Washington.
I do have Derek Carr going against the stinky Dallas defense on Thursday night. Cam Newton's not even available. So somebody must have taken up Cam. Anyway, Cam Newton's going to have a great week. I'd pick Cam Newton. Ryan Tannehill or Mac Jones. I mean, you know my pick already.
Mine's Mac Jones as well.
Yeah. Devontae Smith or Kadarius Toney, who will not have Jason Garrett, the cheerleader, on the sidelines.
I'm going Devontae Smith.
I'm also going Devontae Smith. He's been a top 30 fantasy wide receiver this year. I like Toney's talent a lot, but the Giants are just a team that I try to avoid in fantasy situations. Kyle Pitts or Dan Arnold?
I'll go Kyle Pitts, even though I don't like it. But Kyle Pitts is just so much more talented, in my opinion. Dan Arnold was traded for, I think, a 4th-round pick. Kyle Pitts would not be traded for anything short of a 1st.
I refuse to pick any Falcon at this point because all they do is burn me every time I say something nice about the Falcons. So I'm picking Dan Arnold strictly for that reason. I think the Jags win this game. Elijah Moore or Corey Davis, either one, or Brandon Cooks.
I'll go Brandon Cooks, and it's because I think Elijah Moore and Corey Davis have big games, but I think they both have big games where I think Cooks just has one massive game.
I'll take the Jet. I think one of those Jet wide receivers are going to outscore Brandon Cooks this week. Mike Williams or Jerry Jeudy?
I'll take Mike Williams. That upside is too tremendous.
I don't know. I mean, Deontay Johnson just had 26 points on Monday Night Football. I think I'm going to be.
That's been since the injury. I haven't really kept up with it.
Not phenomenal. Since coming back from the injury, 7, 12, and 11. So not bad. He's had his targets are great actually. 4, 8, and 9. Just not at a touchdown. So I think he's coming off the bye. I think he gets a touchdown this week. I'm going to take Jerry Jeudy. Devontae Adams or Odell Beckham Jr. This is a tough one again because the Packers are always tough in this, and so are the Saints because.
Well, here's my question.
I like this segment. I like this segment as like a flex spot, but the Packers don't have any flex players.
Well, why aren't we saying Cooper Kupp?
Because I asked you to look at the show notes and you didn't mention that to me. You're right. I mean, you're right. You know what it is? I filled in OBJ first because I like to fill these segment in with flex players, and I filled in OBJ first. You're right. So Cooper Kupp or Devontae Adams. You know what? No. Devontae Adams or OBJ because Devontae Adams is going against Jalen Ramsey. So you know what? It's an even playing field, and I'm taking OBJ.
You're taking Odell Beckham Jr. over Devontae Adams.
I'm taking OBJ because Ramsey's locking up Devontae Adams this week.
I love I love Odell Beckham more than any human being on this planet, including his father that puts up tape of him.
Ramsey's locking up Devontae Adams this week.
I'm taking Devontae. Devontae had a good enough game last time against Jalen Ramsey. Odell hasn't had a good fantasy game.
Yeah, but Aaron Donald's going to have a snack this weekend, and Aaron Rodgers'
toe
is all messed up. Aaron Rodgers' big toe is going to fall off.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, he's going to get sandwiched in between Von Miller and Donald, and maybe he'll just blame COVID at that point. And Jordan Love can come in. I don't know.
No, he's immunized. Don't worry, he'll be fine.
Oh, he's immunized. Horse paste. Adam Thielen or Brandon Ayuk, or I don't know, Devo or Jefferson, either or at this point. I like Thielen or Ayuk. I'm going to take Thielen because Thielen's been really solid. He's just a touchdown machine. That guy, all he does is score touchdowns. He gets like 6 on the year already. I think Thielen has 6 touchdowns on the year. He had 15 last year.
Thielen's been pretty consistent. I know we talked about touchdown regression at the start of the year, but he's still getting those touchdowns. I'll go Thielen, but I think this is going to be closer than people think.
Thielen's had 8 touchdowns this year, and he still has like 7 games left. I mean, it's pretty solid. And even his yards, I mean, he's had over 50 yards 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So Thielen's been pretty solid. I'll take Thielen. Jarvis Landry or Hollywood Brown? I'm taking Hollywood Brown again. The Browns are a tougher team to do this for, so take Hollywood Brown.
Hollywood.
DK Metcalf or Terry McLaurin? I don't want to put my faith in the Seahawks. However, if there is a get-right game, this is it. This has to be it.
I thought they were shutting Russ down for the year, Nick.
I want them to. They should, but they're not going to.
You should not want them to, because that means you've watched Russell Wilson's last game as a Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Thanks. The football team's given up the most fantasy points.
Hey, if it makes you feel better, I had to watch Sam Darnold's last game as a Jet last year. Anyway. I'm going DK Metcalf as well.
Yeah, it's got to be DK. All right, that was rapid fire. Hopefully we helped you out with that. And if there are any other flex decisions or lineup decisions that you need help with, Sunday morning, 12:15 p.m. Eastern Time, tune in, live show. Alrighty, I actually don't have a ticker for this segment because I wasn't sure how far we're going to go. But anyway, we're going to do a fun little Q&A here with ourselves. We came up with some questions, and it's Black Friday. So Black Friday always has deals. But are the deals good? Can you get this deal at any point? Those are the questions that you ask. So we're going to ask some questions, some deal-related questions a little bit just for fun. Just fun questions that we're going to ask pertaining to the last half of the season. 3 weeks till playoffs, 3 playoff weeks. I'm starting off with this one because Nick has made this case before and I want him to make it again. Will Jonathan Taylor finish as a running back 1? Is that something that you'd be buying if you're going to Black Friday? Jonathan Taylor finishing as the running back 1.
Jonathan Taylor will finish as the running back 1 in fantasy. He has 40 more points than Eckler. He still has a bye coming up. Eckler will probably get another 20 points closer. But I think Jonathan Taylor has so much potential for these boom games, these dynamite games like you saw last week. Taylor's been really, really good. The two of them have. It's a 2-man race between Eckler and Taylor at this point. They're the only 2 guys over 200 fantasy points. The next closest guy is Najee at 193. Eckler's at 220. Taylor at 264. It's a 2-man race. The 2 guys, I think they're pretty big fan favorites, the 2 of them, unless you had to face one of them this last week. But Taylor's got Tampa Bay coming up. That might be a little tough, but he's been too consistent. He's got Houston, who he should absolutely smoke. New England's been pretty good. They'll probably hold him a little bit. Arizona, they're not going to be able to hold Jonathan Taylor if the Bills weren't. And then they got Vegas championship week. I think Jonathan Taylor carries you all the way home for that title. And I think he finishes at RB1.
As somebody that has Taylor in 4 leagues, I hope you're right, but I think you're wrong. I think Tampa, Arizona, and the Patriots are currently top 6 in fantasy defenses against the running backs, and that worries me. Then he has a bye week on top of it. That stuff kind of worries me, and I'm a little worried that he peaked too early. Derrick Henry last year started getting going week 13, 14. Taylor started to get going week 9. I don't think he finishes as strong as he is right now. I think he's kind of peaked a little bit too early.
That's fair, because also last year the same thing happened with Dalvin Cook and Kamara. Dalvin Cook had his 50-point game, then he came right back with a 40-point or a 35-point.
And he disappeared in the championship game.
And then he hovered 18 to 24 the rest of the year,
Yeah.
which is good. But the RB1 always throws in a 35, throws in a 30. So, I mean, it's definitely possible. I think it's a two-man race. Either or will take the title.
Yeah.
Unless there's an injury.
Yeah. Here's another one. Will Russell Wilson return to his elite quarterback form? This is both in fantasy and real life, but more so for fantasy purposes.
For fantasy right now, he's averaging 16 points per game. For me and Nick have had this conversation pretty openly for a few years. In my opinion, right now he's not, but before the season, I still stood by Russell Wilson was the second best quarterback in the NFL behind Patrick Mahomes. I think Russell Wilson is too talented of a quarterback. That team has too many weapons on the outside, and literally two, but they're two really good weapons that Russ has good chemistry with. They get Washington, San Francisco, Houston. There's 3 games right there to get right. Then the Rams,
Lions and the Bears. He's the Lions and the Bears.
Rams he usually splits with, but he struggled this. I think he might struggle in LA this year, and then he gets Chicago and Detroit. 5 of the next 6 weeks, they're real games and real opportunities for him to recover, get back to that quarterback he was. I don't think Seattle makes the playoffs, even though there's this many winnable games for them, but I think Russell Wilson's too talented of a quarterback to let this hand injury nag him for the rest of the year. And I think if it were that bad, they would have already shut him down.
I don't think it's a Russell Wilson problem. It's a Pete Carroll problem. Pete Carroll isn't getting fired. So I'm going to say no. Pete Carroll's not going to adapt the offense. He's not going to change the offense. Russ has been begging for years to do more up-tempo offense because the offense runs smoothly. That's the only offense they had in Arizona, but no, nope. I don't believe in it. I need to watch him Monday night to believe in it. Will Kyle Pitts live up to his ADP? I think he was like the 5th tight end drafted in most leagues. So I'm saying by the end of the season, are you buying that? You're going to Black Friday to buy a fantasy player. Are you buying Kyle Pitts the rest of this season? I'm taking this. I'll take this first.
You want to go first? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying no because of the Falcons. Because the Falcons don't score points. The Falcons don't do anything productive, and I don't trust the Falcons. So I'm going to say no. I love him in Dynasty, but for this season, they have Tampa Bay, they have Carolina, they have Buffalo. San Francisco is great against the tight ends. No.
All but 1 week this year, he's had 6 targets or above on the season. He's at 69 nice targets on the year so far. I think, with that kind of workload and that kind of talent, it's going to have somewhat of a curve where he will improve. With no Calvin Ridley there, the team has to run through him, not Cordell Patterson. And the tight ends above him right now, it's Mike Gesicki. I don't know if I trust Mike Gesicki. Pitts is averaging more points. TJ Hawkinson, who's been way too inconsistent as of recent. Put up a monster, put him in this category where before that he was not there. And Hunter Henry, who I already told you is averaging less than 4 targets per game. The top 3, Kelsey, Andrew, Waller, I don't think he eclipses them. And then I think Kittle will be able to recover somewhat, but I don't think in total points he'll be able to recover to top 5. I think Pitts sneaks his way in there.
Okay. Will any rookie quarterback finish in the top 15?
So the question is, does Mac Jones finish as a top 15?
Yeah, basically. I'm going to say no, only because he faces Buffalo twice, Indy twice, and hasn't had his bye yet. The quarterbacks above him aren't great. Daniel Jones, Teddy Bridgewater, Heineke, and Carr. Carr's the only one I could see actually scoring more than Mac Jones this season. The other guys, I don't think so. I think he could finish 16, 17. I don't think he gets to 15, though.
The way that they use Mac Jones is, let's balance our team. Let's go chip away. I think they had like a 20-play drive the other night. Mac Jones is a good quarterback. He's good for what the New England system is. But for fantasy purposes, he's had more than 20 points only once this year. For a top 15 quarter, he's averaging 13.4 points per game. For him to crack the top 15, he would need to get up to 17 points per game, which means 20 points or above for the rest of the year. I don't think that can happen unless that there's a couple injuries where people are missing weeks. So I think Mac Jones will be a play some weeks, but I just don't think they'll use him enough for fantasy purposes for him to be a top 15 rest of the year.
Here's a good one. A Black Friday question. Brandon Ayuk was on the clearance rack. He was buy one, get one free. They were throwing Brandon Ayuk's at you on the waiver wire. Do you trust Brandon Ayuk going forward for the next 6 weeks?
It's a wide receiver 52 right now. Since the bye week, the first week back he had 1 target, and since then 7, 8, 4, 7.
We're looking at the same screen right here. We're both thinking
looking
the same
at
thing. I'm going to say yes. His matchup's really favorable. Minnesota, Seattle, Cincy, the Falcons, Trash Atlanta, the Titans, worst team against the wide receivers, Houston, and then the Rams. But the Rams don't matter since that's week 18. He has only favorable matchups going forward. 2 of the last 3 weeks, he has over 80 yards. He has a touchdown in 2 out of the last 3 weeks. I say yes. I say Brandon Ayuk could be a guy that if you picked him up off your waiver wire, maybe it's a bold prediction. I think he could help you win a championship. I think if you picked him up off your waiver wire, I think that's a steal because I think he could turn into kind of like the player that you thought you were getting when he was drafted.
There's always a couple players like that where they struggle early, but you realize you drafted them because you knew second half of the year they'd boom, and you get impatient and you cut them. We might have been early on that. And I was planning on telling you Ayuk is matchup dependent, but I'm looking at the schedule and those next 6
Those matchups are too good. I don't think he is
too
matchup
good.
dependent.
So, do I trust Brandon Ayuk? The answer is no. But will I play him in a good matchup? Yes, and he's got 6 good matchups. So
also,
I don't trust him, but if you're playing a matchup dependent guy, he's got good matchups for 6 weeks.
And if you have Deebo Samuel drafted in around 10, he's winning you a fantasy championship. With these matchups, yeah.
Absolutely.
If you Jonathan Taylor and Deebo on your team, yeah. Patrick Mahomes currently averages the 7th most points per game for quarterbacks. Will he be able to get within the top 3? I'm going to say no. It's too late for that. On top of that, I just think he doesn't have the rushing upside. Number 1 right now is Lamar Jackson, rushing upside. Number 3, Josh Allen, rushing upside. Justin Herbert had like 80 rushing yards last week.
90.
Jalen Hurts, rushing upside, running back 5. Quarterback 5 in terms of averages. Kyler Murray is number 6, and he's been out 3 weeks, and he's still number 6. Kyler should be top 3. Mahomes won't crack the top 3. He may not even crack the top 5 in terms of averages.
Yeah, I think if Kyler Murray healthy's up, 22 points is his floor, and Mahomes is averaging around 20 at the moment. So, will Lamar fall off that much? Probably not. Brady probably
Lamar missed a game
not.
too. He's number 1. He still missed a game. So
Yep. Josh Allen probably not. Herbert potentially, that's fair. Jalen Hurts potentially, but with the rushing upside, probably not.
Yeah.
The question is, does Mahomes put up 35 points per game, 3 touchdowns per game, 300 passing yards? Can he do it? Absolutely. What have the Chiefs shown you in the last few weeks? We're not winning the games the way we used to. We're winning by putting up a good game, a defensive controlled monitor, chip away down the field. They're not hanging 40 points on anybody's head other than the Raiders, who are in shambles. Over the other last 4 weeks, I think they haven't eclipsed 20.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Last question. Is James Conner now, I should put running back 2. Is he the running back 1 in Arizona, and is he somebody you're starting every single week in fantasy football and you're one of your running back slots?
He is the RB8 on the year. Let me see points per game because it does look
I believe since Edmonds went out, his numbers are 40 points, 15, and 20. So I'm going to say yes. I don't think Edmonds is going to sniff the field now. I think he's going to take a backup role. I think Connor's the guy over there. I think Connor. You know what? James Conner is the guy that Nick drafted last year. That's who he wanted. This is the James Conner that Nick thought he was drafting in round 3 last year.
This was the talent I thought I was getting.
Yeah.
I mean, look, he's averaging 15 points per game. For a running back with his ADP, it's a boom. It's not a league winner, but
his schedule's pretty decent. I mean, he's got his last 5 games. Dallas, Detroit, Chicago are 3 of them. The Rams and Indy will be tough, but the other 3, he has 3 pretty good matchups.
Here's my problem with Connor. The problem isn't his talent. My problem is if Kyler Murray is playing, he's only had over 15 points once with Kyler.
Edmonds was there too, so we haven't really seen him without Edmonds. So that's a 3-headed monster now. One of those heads is chopped off.
That's fair. I think he finishes
I like your point. I do like your point with Kyler. We do need to see that, but I think that's more Edmonds out of the
without
picture.
Kyler, he has 6 touchdowns. Or is it 4? I forget if he was at 3 or 4 weeks. No, he got hurt against Green Bay. So over the last 3 weeks, he has 4 touchdowns. It was 40, 15, 21. I think he's somewhere in between those last 3 weeks and those first 8. I'd probably say he gets around that 15 mark. I don't think he really booms too much with Kyler there.
That's fair. Alrighty, for our last segment, we are going to have a little discussion. I wouldn't say debate because we're not slamming tables and saying it's my turn. We're having some people will get that, some people won't. We're gonna have a little bit of a discussion here because we do have time, and why not? So, if you're in a league where your draft order goes from worst record, worst team to best, should you be allowed to tank? And what are the rules of tanking exactly? So, I'll tell you what I do from my league. The rules have kind of shifted, but I don't allow people to play injured players, and I don't allow them to play players on bye. You have to set a legitimate lineup. Legitimate lineup also means that I can't force you to play Tyreek Hill and Ezekiel Elliott. That's just the reality of it. I think one year I may kind of have forced people to do that. I forget, though. But anyway, we don't really have set rules on it. Just so you have to set a legit lineup. Some people frown on tanking in the fantasy community. Some people don't. So, Nick, as somebody that is tanking, I want you to make your point as to what kind of tanking should be allowed in a league where your draft pick is affected by how bad your team is.
So I think that there's got to be some sort of ethics to it. So if you look at how playoffs go and how your standings go in your league, even though you're tanking and losing games, there are a lot of other metrics that determine who makes the playoffs. So first it goes to your head-to-head score. If you split on the year, it goes to your points scored. So you're not really affecting that too much. But what you will be affecting is your points against for your opponent. And, playoff-wise, it does matter because there are some leagues where if you go by how many points are scored. So, for example, Nick has 1,700 points scored against him. That gives him an edge in the standings because it's like a strength of schedule in the NFL. If you have to play the Buccaneers, the Rams, the Cowboys, the Chiefs, like you had a tougher schedule than the team that had to play the Lions, the Texans, the Jets, the Jaguars, right? So there's stuff that goes into it. So my point is, the ethics behind it should be you have to play a playable lineup in the sense of, right, like you're not playing A.J. Dillon if Aaron Jones is there. Like no rational person is going to go tell you play Alexander Madison when Dalvin Cook is fully healthy and out on the field. Like that those are your handcuff running backs, so should not be started. So for me personally, let's separate what is a reasonable start and what is not. Okay?
But you played Ty Johnson last week.
Yes, but
I'm just playing devil's advocate here, Nick. You played Ty Johnson backup running back.
Okay, Ty Johnson was projected a little under 10 points last week.
Nick, I don't want to hear that.
And Ty Johnson put up a 20-point game this year.
The rest of your lineup, I'll agree with on your point, but that's one I'm gonna give you an X for that one.
Ty Johnson got me a win last week. Ty Johnson since the bye week, 13, 19, 14, 8, and then finished this last week with 3. So let's not act like I played some bozo off the street. I played a guy that was averaging. Fair. I was playing a guy averaging 14 points per game going into that week since his bye week. I'm not playing. Okay, so let's clarify that one. I'm not playing some guy that's some Joe Schmo 2 points per game. That was his worst week of the entire season that he had.
And he still won.
I still won. I pulled off the upset. I'm still the 10 seed at the moment, but I think I'm going to try and pull off a comeback with Tyreek Hill on the bye.
So by your strategy, what if you're a commissioner? How do you enforce that? Like, how do you enforce that exactly? Do you say you can't play a backup running back? Like, what do you?
So there's loopholes to it. One of them is, your lineup. You can't play guys projected under 5 points in a game. Like that's fairly realistic, right? Like, I mean, I can't think off the top of my head, like, maybe Danny Amendola when he was healthy is at projected 4 points, but, like not
Right.
terribly unrealistic to play
Right.
a receiver on the worst team in the league that has a good games. Like, it's kind of like case by case pretty much. So there's no real way to reinforce it other than make sure that you establish, let's have ethics in this league. Don't just bench your entire starting lineup, or don't bench your whole team, you know. On top of that, other things you can do is something I've been advocating for is so this way you can, in keeper leagues mostly, so you can prevent something like, if I'm trading Tyreek Hill and Zeke for Jamar Chase, you say you're losing 4 teams, you're going into a bracket. Winner gets the number 1 pick, number 2 gets the number 2 pick, number 3 gets the 3, 4 gets the 4. You do it in a way where you're still fighting for something, so there's still something up for grabs for you.
That's a good idea. The other ideas I like is some form of punishment, not physically or whatever, but like if you're the last team, maybe you should get the 10th pick. Maybe you should try your butt off to win those last few games. So if you're really the worst team and you don't string together some wins towards the end, maybe you should not be getting the 1 pick. Maybe the 5, the 10, whatever. I think that's a way to avoid tanking too in your league, just to ensure that nobody can just not set a lineup or not care after week 6, because it does affect other players. And here's the situation, right? I don't fault Nick for what he did this week. He did the smartest thing for his team. But when I'm already at 1,700 points against, and I do need some help to make the playoffs, my team is number 2 in points. My team is not the reason why I'm 5-6. The team is good. The points forced being number 2 shows that I have the second best team in the league. My record doesn't reflect that. Nick did beat somebody that a loss helps me because now they're only a game ahead of me and I have the head-to-head against them. So Nick's win actually did help me, even though he wasn't trying to win. I think that's the bigger issue with tanking, is how much it does affect the rest of the league, because the reality of a head-to-head matchup is anything can happen no matter who you play. That's the truth of it. Anything can happen. Like Nick won this week with a lineup he didn't think he was going to win with.
Do you want me to read the lineup off?
It's not a bad lineup, but you didn't think you're going to win that matchup, though.
So it was Justin Herbert, Devontae Freeman, Ty Johnson, Chase Claypool, Robbie Anderson, Austin Hooper, AJ Green, and there was one on Devin Singletary.
What stars did you bench? Tyreek Hill.
The only 2 players that were healthy that I benched were Tyreek Hill and Tyler Lockett.
And Michael Carter, too. But then he's not a star, I guess. But
Michael Carter.
You do love him.
I love Michael Carter. That's true.
Carter, again, I don't fault Nick for what he did, but it does affect that's also the issue with head-to-head standings, is that it does affect towards the end of the season. There are even some people. Nick is obviously really into fantasy. He does a show about it every week. There are people that once they're kind of lost a couple games, they delete the app, and then that's that. I don't allow that as commissioner. I don't allow people to not set their lineups, but there are people that do that out there. So it's just a conversation on tanking that we kind of wanted to have. And Nick, I don't know if there's any other points you want to hit on, but I think we kind of described it a little bit. So it's whatever works for your league, but I think there's ways around it. It's always going to be tough to kind of eliminate tanking fully.
Yeah, so there's other loopholes to it where, pretty much I think the most rational solution, like as a commissioner, would be, you have to incentivize, you can't incentivize losing. You have to incentivize winning. So, saying you get the number 1 draft pick because you had the worst team, maybe you don't say that. Maybe you say the 4 teams that missed the playoffs, the one with the best record gets the 1 pick, number 2 gets the 2 pick, 3 gets the 3 pick, 4 gets the 4. So you're still incentivizing winning, and, the teams that missed the playoffs, you're still at the top of the draft because you had a tough year. But you also don't get the number 1 pick because you suck the most as a fantasy owner.
I've advocated that the team that loses in the championship should get the number 1 pick. I've advocated for that one. That should be your consolation prize.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah. Anyway,
I think that would be fair if we money to second place.
Yeah, but you only get your money back. I mean, you're not really winning anything. You're just not paying anything.
Yeah, so you broke even. So even though you weren't the 7 teams that don't get their any money, they get a little more incentive than.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a fun conversation. So hopefully you guys did enjoy that.
Thing, just real quick, that I'm kind of trying to advocate for, which is where you do, there's the 32-man league that people on TikTok do. I don't know if you've seen that.
No.
It's a 32-person league on I think it's on Sleeper, and pretty much, it's 32 people. A trade like, for example, Dalvin Cook for Tyler Conklin, Ty Johnson, and Austin Hooper. It sounds like a terrible trade to me and you, but Dalvin Cook's worth 20 points per game. Those three are worth 28 points per game, so it makes more sense. Whatever. So the way that they do their scoring is because a head-to-head matchup in that, you can really get screwed and fall far behind and have the second most points in the league. The way they do it is you get there's two matchups per game. You have the head-to-head aspect, so you get your win or loss or tie for head-to-head. And then you get a win for being top 16 in scoring, and you get a loss for being bottom 16 in scoring. So even if you win your matchup, but you were, for a 10-man league, you're the 8th scorer and the 10th scorer, you're going to get a win for the 8th scorer and a loss. But
right.
2 losses for being the worst scorer on the week.
Right. Yeah, I wish ESPN allowed that, because that's actually something I knew about before the season, but ESPN doesn't allow it, unfortunately. But I like that system a lot, because you could score 200 points and lose, and that's not really fair. So
the only counter argument to that scoring is, well, when you go to the playoffs, it's head-to-head. Why should it matter?
Yeah, it's true.
But
alrighty, that's our little debate. So that was fun. And that's our show for this week. Thank you guys for listening on this Black Friday edition. Next time you'll hear from us is Sunday, right before kickoff, week 12:15 Eastern time. Be there. Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Social media: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram is PrimeTimeFFPod. YouTube, Facebook, Primetime Fantasy Podcast. The audio versions of Tuesdays and Friday shows on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Google Podcast. And, of course, the video and audio is on YouTube. Nick, best of luck on week 12. Best of luck to me. Hopefully we all get some wins. Hopefully you guys get some wins. Best of luck, guys. We'll speak to you on Sunday.